Hello. If you're visiting for the first time, it's fantastic to have you here. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. This video features mostly true, scary stories with the sound of gentle rain in the background. If you're looking for something to help with sleeplessness, anxiety, or stress, you're in the right place. If you enjoy the stories, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. Thank you for being here. Now, let's begin. I have something really special just for you. Have you ever received an invitation that felt a bit creepy? What if it was for a funeral, without knowing who it was for? Well, that happened to me, and I want to share my story. As things unfolded, I found myself in a situation I never imagined. So grab your snacks, get comfy, and listen in. And while you're here, I want to tell you about an amazing weight loss dietary supplement that helps you shed those extra pounds even as you sleep, without lifting a finger. Just click the link in the description below to learn more. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on this. Now, let's dive into this eerie tale and find out what happens. Now, let's move into the story itself. I received a strange invitation one sunny afternoon. It was an old, yellowed paper with a fancy design on the edges. When I opened it, my heart raced. "You're invited to a funeral," it read. There were no names, no date, and no location. Just a tiny, eerie chill ran down my spine as I thought about it. Who could it be for? Curiosity grabbed me, and I decided to go. After all, what harm could it do? When I arrived at the place, it felt odd. The air was thick, and there were just a few people standing around. Everyone looked serious, wearing dark clothes. I noticed an empty casket in the center of the room, and my heart sank. Where was the body? As the service started, I tried to listen. A strange humming filled my ears, and the atmosphere felt heavier with every passing moment. I couldn't shake a feeling inside me, a gut feeling that something was very wrong. As a man stepped up to speak, the lights flickered. He spoke softly, calling out names I didn't know. I looked around, but the crowd was eerily still, their eyes fixed forward. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and a chill ran through the room. I clutched my hands together, trying to stay calm. Then, one by one, shadows began to dance around the walls. It was terrifying. The figures looked like people, but seemed to fade into the shadows. I squinted my eyes, rubbing them, thinking I was just imagining things. But there they were, ghostly images watching. The man continued to speak, and my heart thumped loudly in my chest. Each name he mentioned sent a jolt through me. Finally, he said a name that made my breath hitch. It was my name. I felt the world spin. What was happening? Did they know I was here? Feeling cold and frightened, I tried to get up and leave, but my feet wouldn't move. They felt like they were glued to the floor. Panic surged through me as whispers filled the room. They seemed to come from the empty casket. I dared to look, and when I did, I saw something that chilled me to the core. A dark shape began to form in the casket, swirling like smoke. The whispers grew louder, echoing around me. "Stay for yourself," they hissed. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen. The shape moved further, revealing a mirror. I stared into it and saw my own reflection. But it wasn't me. Not completely. My eyes were dim, almost lifeless. Suddenly, the room shook, and the casket slammed shut. The lights flickered wildly, and I felt a pull, like something was trying to suck me into that darkness. I screamed, but my voice was lost in the chaos around me. Everyone around me turned, their eyes boring into my soul. The shadows closed in, making my heart race faster. I panicked and tore myself away from my reflection. I could finally move. I dashed toward the door, but it felt like I was running in slow motion. I just wanted to escape. Each second felt like an eternity. I could hear the whispers at my back. "Come back. Join us." As I reached the door, it swung open with a loud crash. I stumbled through, desperate for fresh air. But outside, the world was different. The sky was a swirling gray, and the grass beneath my feet felt like it was alive, wriggling. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, beckoning me back. I realized I wasn't safe. The funeral wasn't over. I glanced back, and there stood the empty casket, now grotesquely wide open. I took a deep breath and started running down the street. But no matter how fast I ran, the shadows seemed to keep pace, creeping closer. With every step, I could hear them whispering, "You can't escape your fate." My heart thumped louder than the whispers. What did they want from me? Suddenly, an image flashed in my mind, a dark, winding path through the woods. Without thinking, I sprinted toward the trees. I pushed through the branches and leaves, feeling the cool air sharp against my skin. Maybe if I could reach the heart of the forest, I could lose them. For a fleeting moment, I felt hope. But the deeper I went, the more unsettling it got. The trees twisted into odd shapes, and the ground was covered in thick mist. Shapes lurked in the fog, and I could hear soft cries, almost like the wind carrying sad songs. I wanted to cry, but forced myself to stay strong. Just when I thought I might escape, I came to a small clearing. In the center was an old, gnarled tree, its roots reaching out like tendrils. Beneath it lay a wooden box. I felt a strange pull toward it, as if it wanted me to open it. I knelt down, my hands trembling, and opened the box. Inside were old photographs, fading with time, of people I didn't recognize. But one caught my eye, someone who looked like me. It felt surreal. As I stared, I realized they all wore the same empty expression I had seen in the casket. My breath caught in my throat. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the clearing, and the shadows from the funeral spilled in, swirling around me. They were angry now. I felt their presence, a weight pressing down on me. Their whispers grew louder and more intense. "You shouldn't have come here." I wanted to scream, to flee, but the shadows were closing in fast. My heart raced as I clutched the box tightly. I realized that this was not just a funeral. It was a cycle, a ritual, a warning. I was being pulled into something darker than I could comprehend. Suddenly, I recalled the strange diet supplement I heard about, the one that helps you lose weight while you sleep. I didn't know why it popped into my head. It just did. Panic made me think of it, because it seemed like such a stark contrast to my situation. The shadows lunged for me, but I remembered the spark of hope I felt earlier. Maybe, just maybe, if I could understand what they wanted, I could escape this terrifying fate. I stood tall, holding the box tightly. "What do you want from me?" I called out. The shadows paused, their whispers turning into a low hum. I felt a flicker of energy burn inside me as I spoke my truth. "I want to know. I want to break free of this curse." As soon as I said that, the shadows shifted, and the whispers turned to a song, a haunting melody that resonated deep within me. I didn't understand the words, but the feeling was powerful, a mix of sorrow and longing. I closed my eyes, letting the music wash over me. Suddenly, the box glowed, and the photographs started to fade, one by one. They floated up, merging into the shadows and transforming into wisps of light that danced around me in a graceful swirl. I opened my eyes and felt lighter. The shadows gazed at me, not with anger, but with something like understanding. They didn't want me to join them. They wanted me to break the cycle, to find a way to escape this unhappy fate. And in that moment, I realized what I had to do. With every ounce of bravery I could muster, I shouted, "I choose life." The dance of light grew brighter, and the shadows began to recede. I could feel their weight lifting, and for the first time, I felt free. The whispers transformed into laughter, echoing through the clearing. I understood that the funeral was not a farewell, but a reminder. Life was fleeting, and we must cherish it. As the shadows faded into the mist, I felt warmth surround me, a sign of hope. I clutched the box tightly. This was my chance to keep living, to tell the tale of what I experienced, and inspire others to choose their path, even in the darkest moments. I took a step back toward the trees, heart still racing but filled with newfound courage. The world felt alive again, the colors bright. As I made my way back, I could still hear the distant whispers, but this time they felt comforting, a sign that I would cherish every moment. When I finally emerged from the woods, the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden rays all around. I breathed deeply, knowing I was safe, but the story lingered within me, a blend of darkness and light. And as I walked back home, I couldn't help but wonder about the weight loss supplement and the life lessons I had learned. Perhaps it was time to share my tale and help others find their way through their darkness, just like I had found mine. So, I invite you to listen, to learn, and to remember. Life is precious. Embrace it, and never forget to choose hope over despair. As I walked home, the feeling of relief washed over me, but it was soon replaced by a prickling sense of unease. With each step, the world around me felt lifeless, as if the trees, once vibrant, now watched me with empty eyes. I glanced back at the woods, expecting to see nothing, but there was a shadow, just at the edge of the trees. It flickered and vanished as soon as I turned my head. My heart raced again, not from fear, but from an undeniable feeling that something was following me. Every night after, I had the same dream. I found myself back at that clearing, staring at the old tree and the box. But now, strange figures moved around me, hunched shapes that whispered in voices I couldn't understand. Their eyes were hollow, like the caskets, and each time I reached for the box, it was pulled away, disappearing into the mist. I woke up in a fright, drenched in sweat, with shadows lingering at the corners of my room. Days turned into weeks, but the feelings didn't leave. Every time I walked past the forest, I could sense its pull, a dark invitation that urged me to come back. I stopped taking the long way home, opting instead for the busy streets. But even in town, I felt their eyes on me, strangers watching with a strange intensity. Their faces were too familiar, as if I had seen them in the shadows. One evening, while sitting in my living room, I noticed an envelope slipped under the door. It was the same yellowed paper, now slightly crumpled. A chill ran through me as I opened it cautiously. "You are invited again," it read. "The box awaits you." Fear curled in my stomach. They wanted me back. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was a prank. Yet the very next day, as I walked to the store, I started to feel it, an urge, strong and unavoidable, pulling me toward the woods. I fought against it, but I felt my feet move of their own accord, leading me closer to the place of nightmares. Finally, I found myself standing at the edge of the forest, the golden light of the setting sun casting eerie shadows across the ground. The path looked familiar, almost welcoming, as if it was inviting me back. I didn't want to go in, but that feeling of curiosity and fear mixed together pushed me forward. As I ventured deeper, the mist wrapped around me again, thick and heavy. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot in the quiet air, and I felt the weight of eyes in the dark. The ghosts of the forest seemed to float around me, shadows dancing just out of sight. Finally, I reached the clearing again, and my stomach dropped. The old tree stood tall, but this time, it was covered in dark, creeping vines that felt alive. The box was sitting in the middle, but it was different now, older, more worn, somehow more haunting. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding louder than before. As I reached for the lid, a gust of wind blew through the clearing, freezing me in place. I could see the shadows flicker at the edges of the woods, two figures emerging from the gloom. They moved closer, creeping like smoke, their shapes twisting and swirling. I could barely breathe. Standing before me were the faces I had seen in town, those hollow-eyed strangers. They were now covered in shadows and whispered in unison, "You must awaken the truth." I shivered, not knowing what this meant. Suddenly, the box exploded open with a crash. The photographs poured out in a flurry of images, filling the air like leaves in a storm. I saw faces of people I had never known, but all of them shared a resemblance, a part of me in each one. The figures began to circle me, and I felt trapped, unable to escape their watchful gaze. Each face whispered secrets as they moved, tales of their despair and heartbreak. I was choking on their sorrow, feeling their pain wash over me. "You are one of us," they whispered, their voices intertwining in a chilling melody. "You are part of our cycle." Panic washed over me as I realized I was never meant to leave. This was my destiny, pulled into an unending cycle of despair. I grasped the box tightly, determined to fight back. I thought of my life, of the sunlight, of running with sheer freedom. If I didn't break this cycle, I might become just another shadow. I broke free from the circle, running toward the overgrown path that led back home. The figures swirled around me, their whispers now angry shouts. You cannot escape. But I focused on that feeling of light, my heartbeat guiding me. As I dashed through the trees, I felt their presence growing fainter, but their cries followed me, echoing in the air. I burst out of the forest, the sunlight hitting my face like a warm blanket. I had escaped, at least for now. But that night, the shadows returned, creeping into my dreams. I found myself back at the clearing, confronting the figures again. This time, I was ready. I shouted into the dark, "I will break this curse." In response, they lunged toward me with furious energy, and as they reached out, I felt an electric shock run through me. For a moment, I saw a different version of myself, a strong, spirited being that seemed untouchable. I shouted again, feeding off the power. "I am not yours. I choose my own path." The light enveloped me, pushing the shadows back. I felt everything shifting. Their cries started to fade. I was breaking free, but at a cost. I knew deep down that they would never truly let go. The weight of their longing hung like a shroud over my heart. The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that a piece of me had been left behind in the woods. Every corner of my room seemed darker, every sound amplified. The shadows danced along my walls, mocking me, reminding me of my fear. One night, I woke up to a knock at my window. My pulse quickened as I peered outside. I saw one shadow, sitting on the edge of my driveway, clearly waiting for me. It didn't move, just sat there, in the moonlight, ominous and still. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. What did it want? I swallowed hard, knowing I had to confront it. Summoning every ounce of courage, I crept toward the window. The distant figure began to whisper, words barely audible. "Join us." It beckoned softly, inviting and chilling all at once. For a moment, my resolve wavered. What if I went back? The thought of knowing the truth tempted me. But deep down, I remembered that horrible feeling of despair, and I wouldn't allow myself to be pulled under again. In a moment of bravery, I shouted back, "No, I choose life." The shadow flickered as if startled, then faded away. But relief was short-lived. As the days turned into restless nights, odd events began to unfold. My reflection looked different, as if someone else's eyes peered back at me. My friends spoke of seeing me wandering in the woods at night, but I had no memory of it. I was haunted by the fear that I was being watched, followed by something sinister. On an especially dark evening, I decided to confront my fears. I headed straight for that cursed forest, flames of determination flickering within me. I needed to know what was real. As I stood at the edge, memories of my previous encounters flooded my mind. This time, I was prepared. I stepped inside, walking down the path with a sense of purpose. The shadows greeted me, whispering secrets I couldn't quite understand. They wrapped around me, cold and biting, but I pressed forward. The clearing was waiting. When I arrived, the old tree awaited me, and the box sat ominously in its roots. With shaky hands, I opened it again. Instead of photographs, this time I found small objects, trinkets belonging to those who had come before me. Each held a memory, a whisper of life trapped inside. As I touched each item, flashes of their stories came alive. I could see their lives, joy, sorrow, hopes, dreams, all snuffed out in that dark place. A voice rung out from behind me, hauntingly familiar. "You are next." I turned slowly, and the shadows swarmed around me, their faces contorted in fear and rage. It was then I saw the empty casket standing behind me once again. I felt a chill run down my spine, mixing dread and anger. They were trying to pull me into their sorrow, but I wouldn't let them win. I shouted, "You can't have me." A wave of energy surged through me, illuminating the clearing. The shadows shrieked in pain, their forms blurring and twisting. I could feel myself pushing against them with all my strength. Suddenly, a bright light pierced through the darkness surrounding me. I felt warmth enveloping my body. It was a light of protection, hope, and life. I could see the shadows begin to shrink away, their whispers fading into silence. But just as I thought I had won, the darkness pushed back, clawing and shrieking, desperate to keep me in their grip. My heart raced in my chest. I could feel their anger and sadness crashing against the light around me. The box, now radiating a strange energy, pulsed urgently in my hands. I realized that it held not just memories, but power. Power to release the souls trapped within. Taking a deep breath, I held it tight and whispered, "Be free." As I spoke, the light grew brighter, engulfing everything in its warm embrace. The shadows twisted and howled, but one by one, the shapes released themselves from their dark forms, spiraling into the air. I watched as they transformed into wisps of light, shining with relief, finally free from their pain. Yet, even in their release, a part of me felt incomplete. I had broken the cycle, but the cost was high. I could hear their last whispers, "Thank you." But the feeling was inexplicable, leaving me hollow. Just then, I felt an ominous presence lurking behind me again. I understood, deep down, that I had not just helped them. I had opened a door to something much worse. The shadows may have been released, but dark entities lingered in the corners of my mind. They crept back into my dreams, taunting me, making me question if I was truly safe. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear them laughing, those hollow, echoing sounds that would linger even in daylight. From that day forward, I lived in a world where shadows held secrets. While I had saved those souls, it felt like I had exchanged one fear for another. Every echo disrupted my thoughts, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I knew then that the shadows were still with me, always waiting, always watching, and growing stronger. As I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, I made a vow. I would uncover the dark truth that bound my life to the shadows. The haunting memories pushed me forward, a quest to understand how to truly break free. And so, I knew this was only the beginning. I would have to confront the darkness again, to find out just how deep the shadows ran and what horrors lay just beyond my reach. Never again would I turn away. I had to discover the link between those shadows and my own life. With that thought in mind, I drifted into uneasy sleep, the whispers already creeping into my dreams once more. I could see the figures standing outside my window, always waiting. They were my constant companions now, and they had a story to tell, one that could shake the very foundations of my reality. Little did I know how twisted and tangled my path would become, filled with secrets, betrayals, and unimaginable truths. I was bound to uncover those truths. But at what cost? Whatever awaited me in that dark place, I was determined to face it head on. And so began my journey into the dark unknown, where every shadow held a secret, every whisper a warning, and I was the key to unlocking a fate that could change everything. I had chosen to embrace the shadows, but with that choice came responsibility. I sensed the darkness still lurking, aware I had awakened something within the forest, a power that could either save or consume me. A chilling thought gripped me as I prepared to face what lay ahead. I had escaped the first time, and I would escape again. No matter what, I would uncover the truth. As I drifted into a restless sleep, the shadows settled in around me, swirling like fog in a dream. I could feel their energy, heavy and thick, slinking into my thoughts. They were both familiar and frightening, and deep down, I knew they were looking for something. In my dreams, I found myself standing back in that cursed clearing again. The air was thick with tension, and the tree loomed larger than before, its gnarled branches stretching toward me like skeletal fingers. The sky was dark, choked with clouds, and I could hear faint whispers in the wind, calling my name, echoing despair that felt almost like a warning. "Come closer," they seemed to chant, their voices blending into a haunting melody. I stepped forward, unable to resist their call, my heart pounding loudly in my chest. As I neared the box, now more ominous than ever, I felt the sensation of dozens of eyes watching from behind the tree, waiting, yearning, and almost hungry. I hesitated for a moment, recalling the warmth of the light that had once enveloped me. But now, doubt crept in. Would I find salvation or destruction if I opened the box again? With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. Inside, I saw not just photographs or trinkets, but something darker. A black mirror that reflected not my outside, but the swirling shadows within me. It pulsed with an eerie light, drawing me closer. I could hear fragments of my own thoughts, twisted and distorted. "You belong to us," they whispered seductively, the shadows seeming to swell and dance within the reflection. I recoiled, my breath hitching in my throat. The air grew colder, and the shadows began to whip around me like a storm. I could feel them closing in, suffocating me with their presence. I knew I had to escape, but their voices grew louder, more insistent, drowning out my thoughts. "You are one of us," they shrieked in unison, their cries piercing through my resolve. In that moment, I saw flashes of the people in the photographs, those who had been lost, their faces twisted in anguish. I realized I was more connected to them than I had thought. Tears filled my eyes as I grasped the truth. I wasn't just facing their past. I was facing my own fear of becoming something dreadful, something lost forever. But then a gut-wrenching noise shattered the chaos, a sharp crack that echoed through the clearing. I turned suddenly, and a towering silhouette appeared behind me, its outline sharp against the dark sky. The form was hunched and twisted, its face obscured by shadows. I could feel its eyes boring into me, a malevolence that froze me in place. I wanted to run, but I was trapped, held by sheer terror. "Come with me," it growled, its voice a low rumble that sent chills racing down my spine. The heaviness of dread settled on my shoulders, dragging me deeper into despair. The figure extended a hand, cloaked in darkness, beckoning me to step forward. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of a fractured reflection in the black mirror, showing me standing alone, slowly being absorbed by shadows. My heartbeat quickened as panic surged through me. I couldn't let this happen. With a surge of strength, I cried out, "No, I won't let you take me." Suddenly, the clearing erupted with chaos. The figures now swirled around me, their angry whispers crescendoing into a terrible roar. I turned back to the box, desperate for an answer, any way to break free from this nightmare. The roots of the tree began to writhe like snakes at my feet, threatening to ensnare me. Instinctively, I reached into the box, grasping the black mirror. A surge of energy coursed through me, and I felt the shadows recoil, their whispers turning from anger to something like fear. I knew I had to harness this power. It wasn't just a reflection. It was a weapon against the darkness. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice echoing strong and resolute. I held the mirror out in front of me, its surface shimmering brighter. The shadows screamed in agony as the light engulfed them, their forms twisting and distorting in the glow. I could feel them fighting, battling against the light, struggling to reclaim me. I pressed forward, shoving the mirror toward the looming figure. "You are nothing," I shrieked, pouring every ounce of defiance into those words. The shadows shrieked again, and I felt a burst of warmth wash over me as the mirror's light shattered their hold, forcing them back. Yet, just when I thought I had gained the upper hand, the ground shook beneath me. A crack split open, revealing a dark abyss that stretched endlessly below, as if the forest itself was awakening. I stepped back in horror, realizing there was no escape. "You can't run from us," the voices echoed, a chilling reminder that no matter how far I pushed, they were always there, lurking just out of sight. Desperation clawed at my heart. The abyss looked all-consuming, a dark void that promised oblivion. I could feel its pull, threatening to swallow me whole. With resolve pushing me forward, I stepped closer to the edge. But just as I was about to tip over, I caught a glimpse of the shimmering mirror in my hand, and an idea sparked in my mind. Maybe I could turn this dark fate around. I raised the mirror high, focusing all my energy on its light. "I will not be consumed by darkness," I declared, sending a wave of light crashing outward. The shadows writhed and screamed, their forms twisting violently. Every soul I had seen in the photographs surged into my mind, faces filled with hope and despair, anger and sadness. I pulled from their strength, launching the light into the abyss below. The darkness writhed, gnashing its teeth, trying to resist. But the surge of light grew powerful, illuminating the depths of the chasm. With a blinding flash, I felt the shadows begin to crack and splinter, as if being torn apart at the seams. But a terrifying realization washed over me. This darkness was no ordinary force. It fed on fear, anger, and despair. I couldn't just fight it. I had to understand it, face it head on. In an instant, I planted my feet firmly on the ground. "I am not afraid," I shouted, and as the words left my lips, the abyss began to tremble, recoiling from my voice. I felt the shadows shifting, swirling violently around me, unsure of how to react. But deep down, I was aware this was only the beginning. The darkness would not vanish so easily. Even as I fought against it, I knew a battle was brewing, and I had stirred the forces that pulled on the fabric of my reality. The figures huddled near the edge of the forest, their whispers changing from angry shouts to something more sinister. "This is just the start," they warned, their voices a low hum that echoed in my mind. I felt them reaching out, clawing at the edges of my sanity. Days turned into nights filled with haunting shadows. I was left with their echoes, reminders of what lurked within. It became harder to distinguish between my dreams and reality. The forest called to me each night, pulling me back as if I was tethered to its dark heart. Even in daylight, I caught fleeting glimpses of those familiar figures, watching from the corners of my vision. I turned quickly, but they were gone, just shadows dancing on the periphery. My friends noticed I was different, more distant. I often caught them exchanging worried glances. Had they sensed the darkness too? It was during one such evening that a storm rolled in, turning the sky a heavy gray. I felt an urge I couldn't ignore. I found myself standing at the edge of the woods, rain pouring down in sheets, the air electric with tension. Each drop felt like a reminder of the shadows that awaited me. This night, I wasn't just facing the remnants of my fears. I felt something worse creeping closer. As I stepped into the forest, the shadows stirred with energy, alive with menace. They swirled around me, feeding off the storm's chaos. I moved deeper, determined to confront the darkness swirling within. When I returned to the clearing, I found the tree twisted and gnarled, almost like it had turned malicious. The box lay open, the mirror glowing ominously, demanding I take action. But this time was different. Dark figures slithered out of the background, coalescing into forms I recognized, lost souls, each one filled with sorrow and desperation. "You cannot escape your fate," they wailed, voices mingling like a chorus of despair. I felt their anguish seep into my very bones, layers of suffering stretching back through time. "I understand your pain," I whispered, my heart aching for their loss. "But I won't let it take me. Not again." The storm raged on above, crashing down around me as I stood my ground. The shadows began to close in, their whispers growing louder, suffocating my resolve. "We are the darkness," they shouted, their fury crashing against my defenses. But I raised the mirror, its light blazing fiercely against the storm. "You have no hold over me." With every ounce of defiance, I focused on the warmth spreading through me, igniting the darkest corners of my mind. The shadows recoiled, comparing their sorrow against my light. With each pulse of energy, the pain they wrapped around me began to unravel, revealing the emotions lurking beneath. I felt their anger, their fear, and their loss. But I refused to be consumed. The storm intensified, but I stood firm, ready for a final confrontation. I had to end this cycle once and for all. I focused my will on the bubbling fury around me. "I am not afraid," I yelled again, and my voice cut through the darkness, resonating with undeniable strength. As I shouted, the ground trembled beneath my feet again. But this time it felt different, charged with energy. The shadows shuddered, their forms breaking and fading as if they were being pulled into the light. I could feel their energy drawing away, leaving only a faint echo of their cries behind. The darkness screeched, a cacophony of sound that filled the clearing with rage, and I pushed forward with the mirror raised high. "Your time is over," I declared, and with one mighty burst of light, I sent the shadows spinning into the void. But as the air cleared and the echoes of their anguish faded, I realized too late. The ground beneath me cracked open as the remnants of the shadows sought to anchor themselves again, pulling everything toward the abyss. I was losing my footing, slipping toward the chasm that promised oblivion. In a desperate attempt, I swung the mirror wide, and as it bounced against the edge, a blinding light erupted from within, sending shockwaves through the clearing. The light tore through the darkness, shattering the shadows that had once felt invincible. The remnants of figures echoed in the air, their once angry voices now transformed into whispers of gratitude. But the crack beneath me widened, and dread surged through me. I could either fall into the abyss, consumed by the darkness, or find a way to summon enough strength to pull myself back. With the light enveloping me, I focused on all that was good and beautiful in my life. Those thoughts fueled my resolve, lifting me back from the edge. I will not let darkness define me. I shouted again, my spirit ignited, but the shadows still clung desperately to my soul, trying to drag me into the depths. I could hear them whispering, tempting me with lost promises and shadowy comforts. Each word felt like a shackle tightening around my heart. I took a deep breath and steadied myself, recalling the warmth I had felt before, the love and light that existed even in the darkest moments. I choose to live, I shouted, and with that simple declaration, I thrust the mirror forward into the void. For a moment, silence fell. With a blinding flash, the mirror erupted with energy, enveloping everything in a blinding sphere of light, pulling the shadows into its brilliance. I felt and heard their cries, but this time they weren't cries of anger. They were cries of release. I watched as the swirling shapes lost their form, the darkness dissipating, fading from existence, leaving behind only glimmers of light. As the storm calmed and silence reclaimed the night, I fell to my knees, trembling from the experience. I had faced down the darkness, pulled the truth into the light, and it had set them free. But still, a gnawing feeling tugged at my gut, an unsettling realization that I might never fully escape the shadows lurking in my mind. Even as daylight broke through the trees, illuminating the clearing, I vowed to keep fighting against the remnants of my fears. I knew that the darkness might return, but I had also discovered what true strength meant. I wouldn't let those shadows possess me again. With heavy breaths, I rose to my feet, the morning light bathing the clearing in a golden hue. But even as the sun shone down, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The darkness had receded, but it wasn't gone. I could sense it lingering just beyond the edge of my sight, a whisper waiting in the recesses of my mind. Every shadow that danced behind a tree felt alive, almost sentient. I couldn't shake the feeling that something still lurked, waiting for me to lower my guard. I glanced back at the box, its surface gleaming now, but I couldn't help but feel it held more than just memories. The hair on my arm stood tall as I took hesitant steps away. I knew better than to think this was over. I was still tethered to that world, and the shadows had learned I could stand against them. What if they decided to come back stronger, more relentless? Days passed, but the unease clung to me like a second skin. I found it hard to concentrate. Every sound sent tremors through my body. Friends invited me out, but I often declined, preferring the safety of my room. They tried to coax me into joining them, laughing and joking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness waited just outside my door. One evening, I sat on my bed, staring blankly at the wall when I heard a soft scratching sound. It came from my window, a gentle rubbing like nails against the glass. My heart began to race as I felt my skin grow cold. I didn't dare look at first, fearing the sight that awaited me outside. Just the wind, I tried to convince myself, but the scratching continued, more insistent this time. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to glance out the window. The night was deep and dark, the moon barely casting light, but there in the shadows were those familiar figures, faces twisted in sorrow and pain, their eyes glowing faintly against the darkness. I stumbled back, my pulse racing. They were back, standing just beyond the edge of the light, waiting for me to join them. A shiver ran through me as I pressed my palm against the window, trying to steady my breathing. "I won't," I whispered, knowing full well the truth behind my words. But the figures didn't move, their expressions frozen in a silent plea. The scratching grew louder, transforming into an urgent tapping. I could almost hear them calling, their voices mingling into a blend of cries that tugged at my heart. It felt like they were inviting me to understand their pain, to share their burden. With every passing moment, my resolve began to waver. Maybe they just want help, I murmured to myself, justifying the growing curiosity. A mix of dread and compassion filled my chest as I approached the window again, my heart pounding furiously in my ears. As I peered out, the figures seemed to shift and swirl, moving closer. I could see details now, their sorrowful eyes locked onto mine, begging without words. "Please," one of them mouthed silently, its expression twisted in a painful longing. My stomach churned as I felt their desperation seep into my very bones. The temptation to let them in grew stronger, but I could sense danger lurking in that desire. Memories of the dark figures lunging at me filled my thoughts, the chilling sensation of being dragged into despair. I shook my head violently, trying to push those thoughts away. "You aren't real," I whispered, knowing they were, in a way. In a moment of weakness, I pulled the curtain shut, blocking their anguished faces from view. "I can't go back," I told myself firmly, my pulse pounding in my throat. But deep down, I felt a knot forming in my gut, telling me the shadows wouldn't give up easily. The next morning, I woke to a feeling of dread, an oppressive weight hanging over me. The world felt eerily quiet, as if the air was holding its breath. I ventured outside, hoping the sun would chase away the lingering shadows. But something felt off. The trees seemed denser, their branches heavy like dark clouds overhead. An unnatural chill wrapped around me, and I could almost hear whispers carried on the wind. "They're waiting," I thought, anxiety lacing my every step. Each sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a crow, felt like a reminder that the shadows were still there, just beyond the veil of everyday life. As the sun began to set, the shadows grew longer, creeping like tendrils towards me. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me. The evening felt different. The house seemed to hold secrets, walls breathing with an ominous energy. I tried to busy myself with mundane tasks, but every creak and groan of the house made my skin crawl. When night fell, I leaned against my wall, heart racing. I thought about the box again, wondering what other truths it held. Maybe I had only scratched the surface. Maybe it could help me understand what I was facing. Intrigued and terrified, I decided I had to return to the clearing. I picked up a flashlight and set out into the evening darkness, my body tense with anticipation. The air grew thick and heavy with every step toward the woods. I could feel my heartbeat sync with the rustling trees, each step echoing louder than my pulse. Finally, I stood in the familiar clearing, the box waiting for me. As I approached, the air grew colder, and a low hum vibrated beneath the surface. I could see the mirror softly glowing, illuminating the space around it. Taking a deep breath, I knelt before it, carefully reaching out for the lingering energy. But as my fingers brushed against the box, a freezing wind whipped through the clearing, causing the hairs on my neck to stand on end. "Leave now," a voice echoed through the trees, deep and unsettling. The shadowy figures loomed at the edges, slipping from the darkness. "You shouldn't have come back." I hesitated, my resolve wavering. I could feel panic rising within me as I scanned the shadows, their forms distorting with malice. "I need to understand," I shouted, my voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" The wind howled in response, swirling around the clearing, a frigid reminder of the darkness I was challenging. I steeled myself, feeling adrenaline coursing through my veins. I couldn't back down now. With renewed determination, I lifted the mirror, its light slicing through the darkness. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering with uncertainty. "You think you can defeat us? We are eternal," they screamed, their voices a cacophony of rage and despair. "No, I choose to fight," I declared, sending the light streaming into the darkness. The shadowy figures shrieked, losing their shapes, fear evident in their once ominous forms. Yet as I continued to push back, I felt an overwhelming force surge from deep within the ground, pulling me closer to the very void I had fought against. I stumbled, the world spinning around me. The raw power emanating from the earth was intoxicating, begging me to give in. The mirror flickered, dimming as shadows enveloped me, threatening to erase every ounce of my being. I gritted my teeth, fighting against their pull. "I will not be lost to you," I roared, wielding the mirror fiercely, channeling all my strength into it. The shadows writhed violently, howling in anguish as their hold weakened. I felt the mirror surging with newfound energy, as if my resolve was amplifying its power. "You are nothing but a memory," I shouted, pouring everything I had into the glass. With one final push, I unleashed all my energy. Light poured from the mirror, forcing the shadows away, illuminating the clearing in a bright blaze. The figures shrieked, blurring and vanishing as the darkness unraveled around me. But as the last scream faded, an unsettling silence returned. I felt the mirror in my hands, now warm but strangely heavy with the burden of the fight. Had I truly won? Or had I only weakened the darkness for another battle to come? Even as dawn broke, I understood the shadows were still there, lurking beneath the surface of my thoughts, waiting for the next moment of weakness. I was only beginning to scratch the surface of my own darkness, and I wondered, what more would I have to face? Even as I walked away from the clearing, the weight of what I had done pressed down. I had fought bravely, standing against the tide of shadows, but how long could I keep it at bay? The thought haunted me as I stepped back into my world, my heart heavy with the knowledge that the darkness was far from over. With each passing day, I felt the shadows stirring, their whispers creeping into my dreams. And as night fell once more, I braced myself for what was yet to come, knowing that the battle was not just against them, but also against the fear that lived inside me. Would I find the strength to continue fighting? Only time would tell. I stepped back into my world, my heart heavy with the knowledge that the darkness was far from over. The sun rose, casting golden rays through the trees. But something felt off. The air was thick with tension, clinging to me like a wet blanket. Every sound felt amplified. A hushed whisper echoed through the streets, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something catastrophic to happen. Each night, I tried to convince myself that the fight was behind me. But every creak of the house, every rustle of the leaves outside sent shivers down my spine. My dreams became a playground for nightmares, scenes flickering with shadowy figures calling to me, their pleas mixing with my own fears. I dreaded sleep, but I couldn't avoid it. One particularly restless night, I tossed and turned, every noise sending me spiraling deeper into dread. Just as fatigue pulled me under, I was jolted awake by a heavy thud. My pulse quickened, the sound reverberating through the empty, silent house. I sat up in bed, the cold sweat trickling down my back. With slow and cautious steps, I made my way to the door. The moment I opened it, a chill cascaded through the hallway, like icy fingers brushing against my skin. Shadows seemed to stretch and bend at the corners of my vision, whispering secrets I couldn't grasp. Each step felt like a challenge as I moved cautiously towards the living room. The thudding noise had stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence, so heavy I could hear my heartbeat echo in my ears. I felt like someone was watching me, lurking just beyond the edge of the light. When I reached the living room, I froze. My heart dropped to my stomach as I noticed the box. It lay wide open, the mirror glinting ominously in the dim light. How had it gotten there? I was sure I had left it in the clearing, far from my home. A sense of dread washed over me as I stepped closer, the air feeling charged with something I couldn't place. As I approached the box, the shadowy feeling intensified, wrapping around me like a fog. I hesitated, remembering the faces that had haunted me, their expressions full of despair. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind rushed through the windows, slamming them shut with a deafening bang. I jumped back, my heart racing as the room plunged into darkness. I grabbed the flashlight, my hands trembling, and flicked it on. the beam slicing through the blackness. The light illuminated the corners of the room, but the shadows seemed to throb and pulse, alive with a malicious energy. I could swear I saw shapes shifting just beyond the edges of the light, watching and waiting for the chance to leap out. "Get away from me!" I shouted, not sure if I was addressing the darkness or voicing my own fears, but I could feel something pushing against my mind, clawing at the walls I had built. I didn't want to invite them in any further, yet a twisted part of me felt drawn to explore what the box might reveal. In that moment of hesitation, the air grew thick with whispers, a cacophony of voices that tugged at my mind. "Join us," they beckoned, sly and seductive. "Embrace the darkness. Understand what lies beneath." My heart raced, caught in a turmoil of dread and fascination. Just then, the mirror flickered, casting an eerie glow that illuminated the room. I leaned closer, captivated yet terrified. The surface of the mirror shimmered and shifted, showing fleeting images of the shadowy figures, lost souls hovering on the brink between despair and hope. I could see fragments of their lives, a fleeting smile, a moment of joy, all twisted in agony as they faded back into darkness. As I watched, I felt something awaken within me, a yearning to help, to understand their suffering. But another part of me screamed to pull away. They were trapped, and they wanted to pull me down with them. "No," I choked out, stepping back, even as the shadows crept closer. The walls of the room seemed to quiver, breathing in tandem with my rising anxiety. I turned to run, but as I reached the door, it slammed shut on its own, locking me inside. "You belong with us," the whispers echoed louder now, intertwining with my thoughts, tugging me toward the mirror like an invisible string. Frantic, I pounded on the door, shouting for it to open, hoping against hope that someone outside could hear my cries. Then, in the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. A dark shape slipped from the shadows, creeping toward me with unnatural grace. It was horrifying, its face stretched into a ghastly imitation of a smile, eyes hollow and void of life. "Help us see the truth," it hissed, its voice chilling as it edged closer. The panic clawed at my throat, choking me. "No, I can't," I gasped, but part of me felt drawn to it. The figure reached out, hands twisted and gnarled, beckoning me closer. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I spun back around, throwing myself against the door, desperate to escape. "I won't give in," I shouted, digging deep within myself to find strength I wasn't sure I had left. But as I pounded on the door, I felt it shift behind me, the shadowy figure smirking, twisting the very air around me into a suffocating haze. Suddenly, the mirror exploded in a flash of light, blinding me. I shielded my eyes, but the warmth quickly turned cold, filling the room with freezing dread. As the brightness faded, I heard faint laughter echoing around me, dark, cynical laughter that made my skin crawl. "Now you see," it whispered, its voice wrapping around me like a vine. I staggered back, feeling the shadows closing in, fear washing over me as the room twisted between light and dark. The pressure on my chest grew unbearable, suffocating me, stealing away my breath. Just as I thought I would collapse, the room shuddered, breaking the oppressive hold. I regained my footing, darting for the window, my mind racing. I pushed against it, desperate to escape the horror that felt like it was engulfing me. To my disbelief, it opened, allowing a breath of fresh air to rush in, carrying away the stench of dread. But even as I staggered through the open window into the night, I could feel the pull of the shadows still lurking behind me, whispering dark promises of despair. The chill of the air cut against my skin as I raced away, my heart pounding in my chest. I had escaped for now, but I was haunted, knowing they wouldn't give up so easily. With every step away from the house, I could feel the weight of the darkness press against me. The sky above felt heavy and foreboding, storm clouds gathering like dark thoughts. I couldn't go back, but where could I run? Every corner of the street felt more sinister under the shroud of night. Lights flickered ominously, casting long, curling shadows that seemed to reach for me. I could almost sense the eyes watching from the darkness, waiting and planning, and it made me want to scream. I knew the shadows were here, even in the open air, slithering through the cracks of reality. Just as I turned a corner, a chilling wind swept through, thinning the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, slipping through the shadows, tracking my every move. I quickened my pace, glancing over my shoulder, only to see the street empty. But the whispering in my mind persisted, relentless and sinister. "You'll never escape." The sound rang clear, a haunting reminder that the shadows would always chase me, would always be there, lurking just out of sight. I stumbled into a small alley, seeking respite, but the darkness pooled there, alive with energy. It felt like a trap, and I had wandered straight into its embrace. Against the brick walls, I pressed myself, my breath quickening. The silence was deafening, accompanied only by my frantic heartbeat. But then, out of nowhere, laughter erupted around me, echoing from every corner. It was hollow, a sound that made my blood run cold. My hands shook as I strained to listen, trying to decipher the meaning behind it. The overwhelming sense of dread curled in my stomach as I backed further into the alley, searching for a way out. I was surrounded, trapped in a suffocating cocoon of darkness and whispers that beckoned me deeper into despair. With nowhere left to run, I sank to the ground, feeling small against the encroaching shadows. "Join us," they murmured. "You're one of us now. Embrace the darkness." I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking my head violently as I muttered to myself, "I won't." But the laughter only grew louder, wrapping around me like 100 cold hands. As the darkness closed in, I realized I had a choice to make. Would I succumb to the shadows and allow them to consume me? Or could I fight back, face the turmoil inside me once again, and stand firm against the encroaching abyss? Every ounce of me screamed to give in, to let the shadows embrace me, to finally feel at home among their cries. But deep down, I could still feel the small flicker of light I had fought for, the humanity that kept drawing me back, that reminded me of the beauty that still existed in the world. Somehow, I had to grasp onto that flicker, to rise even in the face of terror. As the laughter swirled and roared around me, I held onto that thought. The light was always there, no matter how far into the darkness I had fallen. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of my spirit pushing against the cold tendrils of despair. "I will not let you in," I shouted, forcing my voice to break through the laughter. "I choose to fight." And with that declaration, I began to push back, digging deep within myself for every ounce of strength, ready for the battle I knew awaited me in the depths of this twisted darkness. I could feel the shadows begin to recoil, surprised, uncertain, a flicker of my defiance igniting a small flame. But as the echoes of my voice faded, I felt the shadows thicken, regarding my challenge with renewed malice. They were angry now, and I understood they wouldn't let me go easily. I braced myself for whatever horror was about to unfold, knowing that the true battle was just beginning. The truth would either set me free or plunge me deeper into a world of shadows from which I might never return. I braced myself for whatever horror was about to unfold, knowing that the true battle was just beginning. The laughter faded for a moment, replaced by a heavy silence that wrapped around me, thick and suffocating. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and uneven, as I scanned the shadows surrounding me, searching for their next move. Suddenly, I felt a cold breeze crawl up my spine, a whisper brushing past my ear. "You cannot fight what you are," it cooed, voice silky yet cruel. My heart raced, and I pressed my back against the damp wall, feeling the roughness of the bricks digging into my skin. I wanted to scream, to shout against this creeping dread, but fear froze my voice in my throat. As I stood there, time seemed to stretch, and the shadows began to dance just out of reach. They twirled and twisted, creating grotesque shapes that flickered in the dim light. My mind raced, and I could feel the panic rising. Each movement felt like a taunt, a reminder of how vulnerable I was. "Face your truth," they chanted, a chorus of taunts echoing in my ears. With each word, I felt the shadows surge closer, pressing against me like a rising tide. ready to drown me in their sinister embrace. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting back the memories that threatened to surface. Every moment of fear, every doubt, every time I had surrendered to weakness. I opened my eyes again, desperation setting in. I am stronger than this, I yelled, unsure if it would make a difference. But the shadows swarmed, relentless, flickering with dark energy that felt alive, like a predator stalking its prey. They lunged forward, trying to wrap around my legs and pull me down into the depths of despair. I stumbled backward, my foot hitting an uneven patch of ground that sent me sprawling. I landed hard on my back, the air knocked from my lungs. Looking up, I saw a mass of shadow crawling toward me, the darkness writhing as it formed into shapes with twisted features. There were faces, and eyes widened, mouths stretched wide in silent screams. "Join us," they pleaded, the voices merging into a dissonant symphony. "You can be one of us." I felt their cold breath wash over me, and an icy hand gripped my wrist, holding me in place. Fear shot through me like electricity. I fought against it, digging deep into every scrap of courage I could find. "You don't own me," I shouted, pulling away as hard as I could. It was like tearing against vine. But finally I broke free. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding. Panic surged as I searched for an escape, but the alley felt like a labyrinth. Shadows flitted around me, playing games with my mind, teasing me, hiding the way out. Then I remembered the mirror, the light that had once pushed them back. I had to get to it. It was my only chance. With renewed determination, I forced myself forward, past the thrashing shadows, dodging as they reached for me, urging me to stay. "Don't fight us," they hissed, their voices laced with desperation. But I couldn't give in. As I burst onto the street, I caught sight of the clearing in the distance, a faint glow lingering in my memory. The night air was electric. I could still feel the whispers wrapping around me, trying to lead me astray. I sprinted down the empty road, the world around me blurring as I pushed myself faster. Each step felt heavy, the shadows seemingly chasing me, clawing at my heels. I dared not look back, forcing myself to focus on the light ahead that beckoned me to safety. But as I ran, the distant sound of muffled crying began to seep into my thoughts. It felt agonizingly familiar, like the echoes of long-lost souls rattling through the darkness. I stumbled as I heard their cries grow louder, merging into a haunting wail that reverberated through the night. "Help us," they pleaded, specters of desire and desperation creeping through my mind. The sound pierced my heart, threatening to slow my feet as the shadows lunged closer. "No," I shouted at the night, fists clenched as I fought to drown out their cries. "I'm not here to help you." The shadows seized this moment of doubt, swirling in around me, pushing back against the will I fought to maintain. The air thickened, and I felt the weight of despair crushing down like a heavy fog. I turned and sprinted into the woods, the moonlight barely cutting through the thick canopy above. The branches snagged at my clothes, tearing at my skin, but I pressed on, ignoring the pain that shot through me. The clearing had to be close, and I could feel a frenzy building within me. The reality of what I faced crashed down, and I knew I was running out of time. Suddenly a figure appeared before me, silhouetted against the moonlight. It loomed, tall and twisted, a man-shaped shadow that radiated malice. My heart dropped as I recognized the face, no face, but the outline was too familiar, a reflection of my own despair made manifest. "Why do you resist?" it taunted, voice dripping with disdain. "You fear the truth, but it's the only way out." The creature stepped forward, the shadows pooling around it, thickening the air with a suffocating presence. I could feel its cold gaze piercing into me, forcing me to confront the darkness I had buried inside. "Leave me alone," I yelled defiantly, desperate to break the spell it cast on me. But the figure merely chuckled, the sound echoing through the trees. "Running from yourself," it hissed, the words cutting deeper than any knife. "You will always be trapped in this darkness, no matter how far you run." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My hands shook as the shadows around me pulsed, with an eerie life of their own, creeping closer, feeding on my fear and regret. They knew my weaknesses too well, and I could feel them clawing at the walls I had painstakingly built, eroding my defenses. "Let go," the figure whispered, the twisted smile spreading wider, as if savoring the moment. "Join us in the shadows. You have always belonged to us." I felt icy fingers reach for me, wanting to draw me into a world darker than I had ever known. "No," I screamed, rage igniting a fire within me. I couldn't let it consume me. Not now. With one last surge, I pushed past the figure, throwing myself into the darkness of the trees. As I ran, I could hear the ominous laughter ringing behind me, drowning in the endless void. The shadows snarled, reaching for me, clawing at the essence of my spirit. I focused on the clearing, determined to reach the light and find the mirror. The forest twisted and turned around me, branches like skeletal hands grasping, trying to stop me. But I felt something else begin to spark within, hope ignited by each breath I fought for, an ember I refused to smother. When I finally broke through the trees, I saw it, the clearing illuminated by the faint glow of the mirror. But the mirror was dark, dormant, and I felt a jolt of terror. Had I come too late? The shadows behind me surged forward, like a tide, threatening to pull me under once more. I sprinted towards the mirror, fear and desperation fueling my legs. As I reached out, my fingers brushed against its cool surface. The feelings washed over me, memories tumbling in a dizzying rush. I knew what I had to do, but the thought terrified me. "Face your truth," I reminded myself, breathing deeply. I grasped the mirror tightly, channeling every ounce of strength and light I had left. The shadows screeched, furious at my defiance as I gazed into the glass, searching deep within my own reflection. "I am not afraid," I whispered, holding the mirror up high, summoning the flicker of light that still burned within me. In that moment, the mirror erupted in a brilliant white light, casting away the darkness like a sunrise piercing the night. The shadows shrieked, recoiling in horrified rage as my will surged forth. The mirror became a beacon, illuminating the clearing and dispelling the night. But even as I felt the shadows shrink, I knew they would not disappear completely. They were part of me now, etched into my very bones. I had to learn to live with them, to understand the darkness that was just as much a part of me as the light. "I will not let you win," I vowed, feeling the energy of the mirror pulsing in response, a promise of strength. But as the last of the shadows faded into the corners of the woods, leaving only silence behind, I could still feel their presence lurking just beyond the edges of my consciousness. I might have won this battle, but the war against the darkness within had only just begun. The light from the mirror flickered, revealing the remnants of shadows still swirling at the edges of the clearing like a restless mist. I took a step back, trembling, fully aware that their whispers didn't just fade away. They lingered, coursing through the air, resonating in my mind like a wretched echo. "Run while you can," a voice hissed, sending chills racing down my spine. I looked around frantically, but all I could see was the soft glow of the mirror casting long shadows across the ground. The dark something was everywhere, silent yet palpable, crowding against my thoughts, urging me to succumb. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment, focusing on the warmth of the light. Yet even with that warmth, a fear gripped my chest, a worm of doubt burrowing deep. What if it wasn't truly over? What if the darkness was only waiting for the right moment to strike again? I felt the urge to flee, but my feet remained glued to the ground, caught in a whirlwind of uncertainty. With a hesitant breath, I cracked open my eyes to look again at the mirror. Instead of just my reflection, images danced across the glass, a vibrant tapestry of moments both terrible and beautiful. Faces flashed, my memories flickering like a slideshow of my life. But the shadows throbbed behind each joyous smile, seeking to pull me into their despair. I took a step closer, compelled to confront what lay hidden beneath my memories. "Show me," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Show me what you want." As if my words acted as a catalyst, the reflective surface shifted, morphing into a dark scene. Suddenly, I was pulled into a memory, a scene from my childhood, shadowed by despair. I stood in my old house, the familiar warmth replaced by a chilling emptiness. I could hear muffled voices, filled with anger and sadness, echoes of my parents' fights spilling into the air. The walls felt alive with the tension, every argument still vibrating in the fabric of the home I once knew. A cold draft brushed against my cheek, and I shivered. "You didn't save them," a voice crooned from the shadows, deep and mocking. "You ran away." The weight of that accusation sank into me like a stone, pulling me deeper into the swirling darkness surrounding the mirror. Guilt poisoned the air, thickening with every breath I took. The truth settled heavily on my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. "No," I protested weakly, but I felt my resolve waver as the memory morphed into a different one. Now I was in the school hallway, surrounded by laughter and whispers that felt like daggers. I stood alone, isolated, while the other kids tossed me glances filled with disdain. Their laughter rang like a bell in my ears, mocking my solitude, taunting me about not fitting in. "Ashamed, aren't you?" the shadows murmured, creeping closer. "You've always been alone." I stumbled back, colliding with an invisible wall of darkness. I swirled in confusion, dread clawing at my insides. "Stop!" I screamed, but the shadows only laughed in response, echoing cruelly. "You can't escape your truth." Just as the laughter reached a deafening crescendo, a sharp coldness pierced through me. It was like freezing water being thrown over my head. I gasped, feeling a rush of panic. The mirror started to ripple like water disturbed by a stone, and I felt myself slipping through, sinking into the shadows as reality blurred around me. I begged to be released, to return to the safety of the clearing, but the darkness only tightened its grip, dragging me deeper into the abyss. Everything felt dim and muted, as if I was submerged in an ocean of despair, the shadows whispering secrets of my deepest fears. They circled around me, becoming tidal waves crashing against my very core. Suddenly, I found myself standing on the edge of a vast chasm, darkness yawning beneath me, swallowing everything whole. On the other side, faint glimmers of light promised escape, but the void between us surged with shadows, writhing and reaching toward me, lost souls craving a connection. "Join us," an echoing chorus sang, the voices harmonizing in a chilling melody. I could feel their longing, their pain pulling at my heart. It resonated with something deep inside me, a part that understood the ache of loneliness. But I also knew the danger, the cost that came with it. "No," I shouted again, trying to cut through their whispers. "I won't give in." My heart raced as I looked from the chasm to the shimmering light, feeling it thrum with hope, yearning for freedom. I began to inch forward, trying to bridge the gap with every ounce of strength within me. But the shadows were relentless, pressing against me like a storm. With each step, I felt as if I were being pushed back, weighed down by their regret and sorrow. It was as if the very air had thickened, wrapping around me like a noose. "You cannot escape what you are," they taunted, a sinister growl resonating through the darkness. Just when I thought I might lose myself to the pull of the void, the shimmering light flared brighter, pushing the shadows back for a moment. "I am not afraid of you," I yelled, though my voice trembled. I could feel the warmth washing over me, filling my heart with a fierce determination. I reached for the light, everything within me focused on breaking free from this endless cycle of despair. The chasm echoed with the shadows' furious screams, attempting to drown out my resolve. I wouldn't turn back. I wouldn't abandon the light that I had to believe existed. Step by step, I forged ahead, feeling the light pulling me closer. I could feel the darkness beginning to dissipate, tears mixing with the shadows around me, struggling in vain to hold on. "Let go," I shouted, feeling the anger erupt like a wildfire. "Leave me be." And then, as if fueled by my sheer will, I leaped into the light, abandoning the void behind me. The world shifted around me, and for a moment I felt weightless, buoyed by the warmth that enveloped me. But as I landed, the world darkened once more. I opened my eyes to a barren landscape, shrouded in gray mist. The air was cold and thick, a stark contrast to the light I had just fled toward. Shadows scuttled in the corners of my vision, always just out of reach, and I could hear them whispering ominously. "You thought you could escape," the voice hissed softly, wrapping around me like a chill. I turned, heart pounding, and stumbled into a structure that loomed ahead, a crumbling building reaching up into the gloom. The facade was covered in vines, thick and black, as if nature herself tried to reclaim it. With a shiver, I stepped closer, drawn inside the clutches of its decay. The air felt stifling, and I could hear the faint echo of footsteps from within, filling my chest with a sense of dread. Each step took me deeper into the shadows, the darkness riding on my shoulders like a weight. As I moved through the door, the floor creaked beneath me, the sound piercing the silence. A flicker of motion caught my eye. In the corner, I noticed dark shapes skittering along the walls. They were fleeting, hardly noticeable, but still enough to send icy fingers of fear grip my throat. I pressed onwards, the feeling of being watched wrapping around me like the suffocating mist. Each room was filled with remnants of the past, broken furniture, peeling wallpaper, and memories trapped in the gloom. I could almost hear the whispers of those who came before, lost souls lingering, searching for peace. In one room, I caught sight of a small, cracked mirror hanging on the wall. Heart racing, I approached, the reflection warping before my eyes. Instead of my own face, I beheld a twisted figure, a silhouette of regret and torment. The piercing black eyes stared back at me, stealing my breath and sending a jolt of dread through my heart. "Lost forever," the figure whispered, its voice a chilling wind that swept through the room. "You will never escape the shadows." Instinctively, I turned to run, barreling back into the hallway. The shadows seemed to pulse with life, swirling and morphing, becoming a living entity of their own. Desperation settled in my chest as I raced back, my mind screaming for a way out. As I sprinted past the rooms, I caught glimpses of other unlucky souls, trapped within the mirrors, silently pleading with me for help, their eyes filled with desperation. I couldn't bear to look, the weight of their despair heavy on my heart, but I felt their longing and pain wrapped around me like a chains. The door I had entered from appeared distant, obscured by the chaos of shadows. They coiled and twisted as if trying to stop me from escaping, pulling at my clothes and hair, trying to claim me. "Don't let them take you," I yelled at myself, digging my heels into the floor. I fought against the shadow's pull, struggling against the overwhelming despair. Each step felt like wading through syrup, heavy and unyielding. Just when despair threatened to claim me, I spotted the faintest glimmer of light spilling through a nearby window. It was a beacon calling me back to life. Gathering every ounce of strength I had left, I charged toward the room, pushing past the darkness, the cold resonating with every desperate breath I took. As I reached the window, I could feel the light promising resurrection, and inside me, a spark ignited. "I am not lost," I shouted defiantly, looking back at the shadows swirling in rage behind me. "I will not be trapped." With one final burst of energy, I leapt through the window and into the embrace of the light. The darkness screamed, a sound of fury and despair, as the warmth washed over me, lifting the suffocating weight from my chest. For a moment, everything felt clear. I stood on the brink of freedom, but the shadows still clawed at me from beyond, waiting for a moment of weakness, lying in wait like a predator. I could feel them lingering on the edges of my mind, always watching, always whispering, reminding me that my battle was far from over. And even as I embraced the warmth of the light, I realized I would need to confront this darkness again, to truly understand its hold on me. There would be more fights ahead. I had to learn how to carry this light into the shadows and discover the truth that lay hidden, buried beneath layers of fear and sorrow. But for now, I was free, standing in a world bathed in light, knowing that my journey had just begun. I had to learn how to carry this light into the shadows and discover the truth that lay hidden, buried beneath layers of fear and sorrow. But for now, I was free, standing in a world bathed in light, knowing that my journey had just begun. Yet, as I took a moment to catch my breath, I sensed something lurking in the periphery. The stillness around me felt deceptive, like a calm before a storm. My heart thudded in my chest, an instinct screaming that something was wrong. The light flickered above me, casting strange shadows that seemed to twist and contort in ways that shouldn't be possible. I stepped away from the window, uneasy, feeling the floor beneath me vibrate slightly, like a heartbeat. Was it real? Or was it the remnants of the darkness still tugging at my mind, trying to distort my reality? I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to believe I was free. But as I opened my eyes again, an unsettling chill filled the air. The light shifted, and the room around me began to change. The walls pulsated, their surfaces warping like liquid. I stumbled back, my pulse quickening as I looked around. The once familiar environment morphed into a dark void, shadows stretching and curling like fingers reaching for me. I felt the familiar coldness return, wrapping around my throat, making it hard to breathe. Desperate to escape, I turned and ran down the hallway. But the world shifted again. I felt like I was trapped in an endless loop, each door leading me to corridors that twisted back on themselves, walls closing in. It was as if the house was alive, and it didn't want me to leave. I could hear the ghostly whispers of those trapped within. Their cries echoed lightly in the air, growing louder with each step I took. "Help us," they pleaded, a haunting melody that scraped against my sanity. A heavy dread settled in my stomach. I needed to find a way out, but every turn I made led me deeper into the darkness, pulling me back into the hollow echoes of despair. Just as panic began to claw at my insides, I caught sight of a familiar door. It looked worn and fragile, but something about it felt undeniably significant. I ran toward it, desperate to escape this twisting nightmare. As I swung the door open, a burst of cold air rushed past me. I stepped into a room cloaked in shadows, the only light coming from a single flickering candle. The shadows flinched back, hesitant, yet I felt their presence swell around the room. Then I noticed the figure in the corner. A silhouette sat hunched over, and I couldn't tell if it was real or just another trick of the shadows. "Help me," it whispered, voice drowned in sorrow, making my heart race. I took a cautious step closer, trying to see its face, but before I could reach it, the figure abruptly turned, revealing eyes like deep black holes that swallowed the light around them. I froze, fear cascading through me as I recognized the pain etched across its features. It was me, yet so much more distorted, twisted with anguish. The other version of me reached out a trembling hand, sharp nails digging into the floor. "They won't let you go," it screeched, the voice a chilling echo of my own. "You'll never escape." The shadows thickened, swirling around me, trying to drag me back into their depths. I wanted to scream, to run away, but I felt rooted to the spot, fear gripping me tightly. "You're wrong," I shouted back, forcing myself to take a step back. "I can break free." The figure laughed, a hollow sound filled with desperation and bitterness. "That's what I thought too," it hissed. "But the shadows are always here." Suddenly, the candle flickered violently, and shadows surged forward like a tidal wave, sweeping toward me with a furious howl. I turned to run, but the shadows were closing around me, an unyielding wall, trying to claim me as their own. I felt myself slipping again, the grip of the darkness tightening around my throat, cold fingers dancing over my skin. Panic surged through me, driving me forward through the dark room and back into the hallway, desperately seeking an exit. I could hear the shadows thrumming in rhythm with my heartbeat, their whispers blending into one overwhelming cry. "Join us, stay with us," they beckoned, trying to drag my mind into oblivion. Each step I took felt heavier, like I was running through water, struggling against an unseen force. My chest felt tight as I forced myself to keep moving, pushing through the oppressive weight surrounding me. The light from the windows flickered perilously low, as if it were about to die out, leaving me alone with the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, I burst into a large room filled with mirrors, each reflecting distorted images of my face twisted in terror. I gasped, panic swallowing my breath. They moved, their reflections mimicking my own frantic motions. but some were twisted with an unsettling grin, eyes wide and unblinking. "Face your fears," one mirror beckoned, voice a cold whisper as it shimmered ominously. "See what you truly are." I stumbled backward, unable to tear my gaze away from the reflections. I could feel them calling to me, urging me to step closer, to lose myself within the glass. I could already see my reflection flickering in the depths, a version of me that seemed to beckon with a sinister smile, masked in shadows. "No, I won't," I yelled, but even as I turned to run, I felt the pull of their voices seep into my mind. "You belong with us," they chorused, taunting. "You can't escape who you really are." In a burst of determination, I forced myself to look away, diving for the door at the far end of the room. As I ran, the mirror started to crack, sharp echoes of my fears splintering through the air. An icy wind howled around me, threatening to pull me back with every frigid gust. I slammed the door shut behind me, breathing heavily, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my veins. But the moment I thought I had found a moment's peace, the shadows started to seep through the cracks. They twisted and writhed like serpents, finding ways into my sanctuary, reminding me that their presence was not easily escaped. I could feel the darkness creeping into the corners, whispering like an unseen predator. "You can't run forever," they echoed, voices a blend of regret and malice. Stepping deeper into another corridor, I felt the walls close in, as if they were getting tighter, the world collapsing around me. With my heart pounding, I ran again, each step echoing like a drum against the silence. I could see a door at the end of the hallway, feeling an instinctive pull towards it. The whispers behind me grew louder, now mixed with anguished cries that rang in my ears, clawing at my sanity. "You will pay for this," they screamed, their hovering presence filling the air with a chilling dread. Finally, I reached the door and flung it open, tumbling into what seemed to be a kitchen. The air was thick with an unsettling mix of sweetness and decay, coming from rotting food scattered across the counter. Flies buzzed in swarms, drawing attention to the sight of a once warm and welcoming space, now turned into a grotesque display of neglect. I felt the oppressive weight of dread creeping back as I scanned the room, heart racing. In the corner, I noticed a figure hunched over like a dark shadow, its back to me, frozen in fear. I couldn't move. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run again. But I was transfixed, paralyzed by the unknown. Then, slowly, the figure turned, revealing a face I would never forget. A hollow-eyed version of myself, wearing a sinister grin. "Welcome home," it hissed, the words dripping with malice. I backed away, terror coursing through me. "What do you want?" It stepped forward, flickering in and out of focus. "Everything," it said, voice dripping with hunger. Shadows writhed around it, trying to reach me, pulling me back into their embrace. I turned and fled, the horrific laughter echoing behind me. I could feel the shadows at my heels, wrapping around my legs, pulling me toward my dark reflection. As I stumbled back into the hallway, the walls squeezed tighter, the echoes of my cries blending into the darkness. "Stop!" I screamed, my voice breaking, but only silence answered. I punched through another door, praying to find safety, but the room was filled with twisted vines of shadow creeping along the walls, each tendril alive with malice. The air thickened, and cold fingers brushed against my skin, sending shivers crawling over me. I scanned the room desperately, searching for an escape, but the shadows enveloped every corner, hungry for another soul to ensnare. As I turned to run again, a flash of movement caught my eye. In the center of the room, an ancient book lay open on a pedestal, pages fluttering ominously in the stillness. Against my better judgment, I approached, feeling an otherworldly pull toward it. The shadows hissed around me, warnings unheeded, as if they knew the power hidden within those pages. "Read it," the voices urged, merging into one hypnotic chant. "Find the truth." I hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity, but the shadows grew restless, and I could feel their anger swelling. With a shaky breath, I reached for the book, feeling an electric pulse as my fingers touched the brittle pages. Words blurred before my eyes, demanding to be read. Each line resonated deep within me, awakening something long forgotten, like unlocking a door to the past I wished to keep shut. Suddenly, the shadows surged, dark figures swirling in chaotic frenzy, wanting to bury my revelations beneath layers of fear. "You shouldn't have done that," they screamed, voices rising to a cacophony. The room shook and the walls began to tremble as the shadows threatened to collapse around me. The light from the book pulsed, illuminating the dark corners in stark clarity. "Face your fears," it commanded, and I felt a rush of courage storm through my veins, igniting a fire within me. The shadows hissed, recoiling from the light, but I stood my ground, knowing I had to confront my demons before they consumed me. "Enough!" I shouted into the chaos, reclaiming the power over my own emotions. The shadows hesitated, momentarily stunned by my defiance. The room filled with the glow of the book, pushing back against the darkness that tried to drown me. But as I read on, the truth began to unravel, synapses firing in my mind as memories spilled out. Faces of those I loved, moments of betrayal, whispers of regrets echoed through the room. I was reminded that to be whole, I had to first accept the darkness within me. As the shadows encroached again, I felt the fight ignite in my heart. "I accept you," I declared, my voice steady despite the chaos. "You are a part of me, but you will not control me." The shadows wailed, their anguished cries tearing through the air like a ravenous beast. The book flickered with energy, its light shining brighter as it fed off my resolve. I could feel the balance between light and dark shifting, the power coursing through me, demanding to be wielded. As I took a bold step forward, the shadows began to retreat, twisting and writhing as they fought against my growing strength. With each word I read aloud, their fury echoed, composing a haunting symphony of sorrow. But I wouldn't back down. I needed to take control. "Leave this place," I commanded, feeling the weight of my words resonating in the air. The shadows screamed, a guttural sound that shook the ground beneath me. In that moment, I knew it was only through acceptance that I could finally break free from their grip. With a final yell, I shut the book and closed my eyes, feeling the surge of light wash over me, cleansing the darkness from within. The shadows shrieked one last time before dissipating into thin air, melting into the walls of the room. I breathed heavily, heart pounding, knowing that for now, I had won. But as I opened my eyes, I understood that the struggle against my own darkness would never fully end. I could feel its lingering presence, waiting and watching, reminding me that the balance between light and shadow was a delicate dance. And I still had much left to learn. But that victory was brief. The shadows had not fully retreated. I could sense their anger simmering just outside my grasp. An uneasy feeling crept up my spine, making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I had pushed them back for now. But was this just the calm before another storm? As I stood there, breathing heavily, the flickering light from the book dimmed slightly, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and breathe on their own. An unsettling noise echoed in the distance, like whispers weaving through the air, barely audible. They crawled into my ears and felt like icy fingers grasping at my thoughts. "Help us," they murmured, voices mingling together in a haunting chorus that sent a chill down my spine. I glanced around the room, desperately searching for the source. The oppressive atmosphere thickened, making it hard to breathe. Each heartbeat thundered in my ears as I took cautious steps, pushing deeper into the chilling silence. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, suffocating. Every shadow flickered like a taunting specter, teasing me with memories of those lost within the dark. Picturing their faces, I felt a pang of guilt twist in my stomach. I had faced my fears, but at what cost? Were they still trapped in the shadows, forever screaming for help? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the room, jolting me from my thoughts. My heart raced as I spun around, eyes wide, searching frantically for the cause. The sound came from behind a rotting wooden door I hadn't noticed earlier. It stood ajar, an uninviting crack revealing only darkness beyond. Curiosity and fear warred within me, but the whispers grew louder, tugging at my resolve. "Go in," they urged, dark and sultry. I hesitated before stepping closer to the door, my heart pounding against my ribs. With a deep breath, I finally pushed it open, the creaking sound echoing like a summons, an invitation I wasn't sure I wanted to accept. I entered a narrow space, filled with dust and cobwebs. The air felt thicker here, almost humid with despair. I moved cautiously, illuminating the room with the last flickers of the book's light. What I found inside turned my stomach. The walls were plastered with photographs, all faces twisted in horror. They were people I recognized, friends, family, even those who had helped me escape the shadows. Their mouths were open in silent screams, eyes wide with terror, forever captured in that moment of fear. I stepped closer, my breath hitching in my throat. It was as if they were trapped in their own personal hell, frozen in time. "Please," one face seemed to say. "Don't let it take you." Panic gripped me again, and I stumbled back, only for my foot to catch on something lying in the corner. I fell to the ground, landing in a pile of brittle bones that crunched under my weight. I gasped, scrambling away. The shadows began to shift and sway, closing in around me. From the corners of the room, dark figures emerged, their features indistinguishable, but their intentions clear. They moved closer, an army of shadows ready to consume the light that still flickered in the corner of the room. "Join us," they whispered, voices harmonizing in a sinister symphony. "You are one of us." I scrambled to my feet, heart racing as I fought against the swell of terror that threatened to drown me. This time, there would be no hesitation. I had faced my darkness, and I couldn't let it win. The light from the book sparked brightly in response to my resolve, illuminating the room with a fierce glow that pushed against the darkness. "No," I shouted, forcing myself to face the figures. Their spectral forms twisted and writhed, enraged by my defiance. "I refuse to be part of you." With each word, the light from the book grew stronger, filling the space with warmth and hope. The shadows recoiled, hissing as if burned by the light. But there were too many of them, swirling around like a tempest, clawing at my mind, whispering promises of comfort if I just gave in and joined them. The cracks in the walls began to widen, the whispers growing more frantic. I could feel the pull, the gravity of despair drawing me back towards the darkness. It was seductive and alluring in its promises. It felt easier just to give in, but I couldn't falter. I remembered the faces of those captured in fear and knew that I had to fight, not just for myself, but for them too. "You don't own me," I screamed, standing my ground as defensive walls of light pulsed from the book, pushing back against the dark tide. In an unexpected moment of clarity, I raised the book high above my head, feeling the energy surge through me. "I command you to leave," I declared, each word spilling with the force of my will. The shadows screamed, their cries a hideous roar that echoed through the crumbling space. They lashed out, but the light from the book enveloped me, swirling around like a protective shield, creating a barrier between me and the darkness. With a final shout, I swung the book forward, feeling the ground tremble beneath my feet as the light exploded outward, filling every inch of the room. The shadows shrieked, twisting violently as they were swallowed by the brilliance, their forms breaking apart like glass shattering across the floor. The air crackled with power, and for a moment, everything was still. Then, with a final, gut-wrenching scream, the darkness erupted, disappearing into the walls as though it had never existed. The photographs on the wall began to fade, the faces relaxing from their pained expressions, eyes closing gently, as if at last finding peace. I finally lowered the book, my breath coming in shaky gasps. The room was quiet now, a heavy silence that felt almost surreal. The light pulsed softly, still glowing in defiance, filling the space with warmth and calm. But even as relief washed over me, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. I could still sense a lingering presence, a dark whisper at the back of my mind, reminding me that the shadows could return. As I turned to leave the room, I felt a shiver run down my spine, the hairs on my arms standing on end. It was as if the ground beneath me was shifting, and faint echoes of laughter began to rise again, a chilling reminder that the darkness was never fully gone. With each step, I could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me, stalking my every move. I had pushed it away, but I knew it was not finished, just waiting for the right moment to strike again. I had won this battle, but the war not yet. As I stepped into the corridor, a sensation of dread wrapped around me like a cloak. The whispers started again, more urgent this time, carrying warnings and regrets. You will return. We will find you. Fighting back a wave of uncertainty, I hurried onwards, the shadows clinging dangerously close behind me, their presence a reminder that I had to stay vigilant. Each turn I took felt heavier, the weight of the unknown pressing against me like a storm about to break. I needed to find a way out, a way to escape not just this house, but whatever fate awaited me. I pressed forward, determined and terrified, ready to discover just how deep this darkness ran and what lay hidden beneath. The path ahead was still shrouded in fear, and I knew that this journey was far from over. As I cautiously turned the corner, a cold draft swept through the corridor, making the shadows flicker and dance around me. Hey! The door stood slightly ajar at the end of the passage, its handle rusted and creaking as if begging to be opened. I felt an irresistible pull toward it, the darkness beyond calling me closer, a lure I knew I shouldn't follow. Tentatively, I approached, each step echoing ominously. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open, revealing a room thick with dust and despair. The air felt heavy, weighing on my chest, filled with the scent of mold and decay. A single candle flickered on a small table, casting ghostly shapes across the walls. But the most unsettling sight was the mirror hanging directly opposite me, its glass clouded yet oddly alluring. I took a step closer, heart pounding. My reflection appeared warped, the edges blurred as if something lay just beneath the surface. As I stared, the image shifted, morphing into twisted faces, familiar yet haunting. They flashed before me, friends, loved ones, all trapped in a silent scream. My stomach dropped as I recognized the fear in their eyes, an echo of the terror I had experienced. But then something shifted behind me. The candle flickered violently, and I turned to see dozens of shadowy figures pooling at the edges of the room, watching me with hollow eyes. A chill ran through me as their whispers grew louder, swirling like a storm, drowning out my thoughts. "Join us, stay with us," they hissed, the chorus growing as their forms shimmered and swayed. Panic surged anew, and I bolted toward the exit, but the shadows surged forward, quick as lightning. The air thickened again, the weight of their despair wrapping around my throat like a vice. I stumbled back, feeling the icy fingers grasp at my skin. "You can't escape," they cried, laughter dripping like venom. I felt trapped, the walls closing in, but I had to stay strong. Digging deep within myself, I remembered the light from the book, the power I had felt when I stood my ground. "You won't take me," I yelled, desperation fueling my voice. I fumbled in my pockets for anything that might bring back that light, feeling the heat of my fear ignite a flicker of hope deep inside me. But nothing was there. As realization hit me, the shadows lunged, and I braced for impact. Just then, the mirrored surface changed again, showing me a path, a way out, illuminated by the light of the book. It flickered, a promise glowing among the darkness, urging me forward. I reached toward the mirror, my fingers grazing the cold surface, and suddenly the world around me shifted. I was pulled through, landing in a bright and expansive hallway, almost blinding after the shadows I had just fled. There was no sign of the darkness, but I could still hear their taunts echoing in the distance, a reminder of what I had escaped but never truly left behind. I sprinted down the hallway, desperate for the exit, knowing it was a race against time. The walls pulsed with unease, shadows creeping along the edges like spiders waiting to pounce. With each turn, I threw glances over my shoulder, half expecting them to chase me. Then, just as I reached a set of double doors, I felt a sudden jolt. A deep rumble filled the air, vibrating under my feet. The doors burst open on their own, swinging wide to reveal a blinding light. A figure appeared within the glow, shrouded in brilliance, but undeniably familiar. I squinted in its direction and realized it was me. But the version of me that showed no fear, no doubt, just courage and strength. A grin spread across my face, and I took a hesitant step forward, heart thumping against my ribcage. "Is it really you?" I asked, voice trembling. The version of me nodded, the light shining brighter. "You've faced the shadows, endured their torment. Now, it's time to break free." With that encouragement, I charged into the light, leaving the remnants of the darkness behind. As I crossed the threshold, an explosive force hit me, the sound of breaking glass filling the air like a sweet symphony. The very walls of the dark house crumbled into dust, the shadows collapsing into nothingness. As I emerged, sunlight washed over me, warm and pure, wrapping around me like a protective embrace. I stood in a field, flowers blooming vibrantly and birds singing overhead, a stark contrast to the nightmare I'd just escaped. The weight of fear began to lift, but I still felt the echo of shadows at the back of my mind. Their whispers lingered like a distant thunderstorm, reminding me that even in light, darkness can still lurk. But I refused to let that fear define me. I had faced the darkest parts within, and I knew that as long as I stayed vigilant, I could keep the shadows at bay. I took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air fill my lungs, and walked forward into the open world. The journey wasn't over. It was just the beginning.